The key didn't fit. I stood on my own front porch with a hospital bag in one hand and a cane in the other, staring at the brass lock I had installed myself 23 years earlier. I tried again, slower this time, turning the key gently as if my fingers had simply forgotten the motion. Nothing. I checked the house number. 214, Willow Creek Road. My house. The place where my late wife and I had raised our son. The place where every scratch on the wooden floor had a story attached to it. The place I had left 6 weeks earlier in an ambulance, believing I would be back before the roses in the front yard finished blooming. I knocked. The door opened almost immediately. A woman I had never seen before smiled politely. Yes. For a moment, I honestly thought I had made some terrible mistake. Maybe the medication was affecting my memory. Maybe I had asked the taxi driver to take me to the wrong street. "I'm sorry," I said. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is my house." Her smile disappeared. "I don't think so." She glanced over her shoulder, and a man appeared behind her. "Everything okay?" he asked. The woman looked back at me. "Sir, we bought this house 3 weeks ago." Bought. The word didn't make sense. I looked past them into the living room. My grandfather's oak bookshelf was gone. My wife's blue armchair was gone. The family photographs that had covered the fireplace mantel for decades had been replaced with pictures of strangers. The curtains were different. The rug was different. Even the smell was different. I felt my knees weaken. "I live here," I whispered. The man stepped forward. "I think you should leave." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my driver's license. "My name is Richard Hayes. This is my address." The woman looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Richard." She exchanged a nervous glance with her husband. "We bought the house from Richard Hayes." I stared at her. "That's impossible." She hesitated. "Do you want to see the paperwork?" I didn't answer. She disappeared for a moment and returned with a folder. Inside was a copy of the purchase agreement. The seller's name was printed clearly. Richard Edward Hayes. My full name. My hands began to shake. "This is forged." The husband frowned. Our realtor handled everything legally. "I was in the hospital." He looked skeptical. "I'm sorry, but we paid for this property. We have the deed." I couldn't breathe. 6 weeks earlier, I had signed consent forms for heart surgery. I had nearly died on an operating table. I had spent days in intensive care. And somehow, during that time, my home had been sold. I stepped away from the porch before I collapsed. The taxi driver was still waiting. He rushed over. "Sir, do you need an ambulance?" "No." I took out my phone. There was only one person I could call. My son. Michael answered on the second ring. "Dad? You're home already." "Michael." My voice cracked. "There are strangers living in my house." Silence. "What?" "They say they bought it." "That's impossible. They have documents." "I'm coming right now." I sat on the curb outside my own house and watched a child I had never met ride a bicycle across my driveway. Neighbors looked at me with curiosity. One of them waved. She didn't recognize me. 40 years in that neighborhood. 40 years. And I was suddenly a stranger. 20 minutes later, Michael's truck came flying around the corner. He jumped out before it had fully stopped. "Dad." He looked from me to the house, confused. "What is going on?" I handed him the copy of the agreement. He read the first page. Then the second. His face went completely white. "This He looked up slowly. "This has your signature." I looked him directly in the eyes. "I never signed anything." Before either of us could speak again, the front door opened, and the new owners walked toward us carrying one more document. It was a notarized power of attorney, signed in my name, dated 3 days after I was admitted to the hospital. I didn't sleep that night. Michael insisted I stay at his house, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw strangers sitting in my living room. I kept thinking about my wife's wedding photograph, the one that had hung above the fireplace for 38 years. Where was it now? Had someone packed it into a box? Thrown it away? Sold it at a yard sale? At 6 in the morning, Michael was already making coffee. His wife, Sarah, wasn't home. "She stayed with a friend," he said quietly. "She couldn't even face me." She was shocked. I looked at him for a long moment. "Were you?" He nodded immediately. "Dad, I swear to you, I knew nothing about this." I wanted to believe him. He looked exhausted, confused, and genuinely frightened. By 8 o'clock we were sitting in the office of an attorney named Daniel Mercer, a quiet man with gray hair and the kind of expression that suggested he had seen families destroy themselves over money before. He read every document carefully. The purchase agreement, the deed transfer, the notarized power of attorney. When he finished, he folded his hands. "Mr. Hayes, these documents appear professionally prepared." "They're fake." "I'm not saying they're genuine. I'm saying whoever created them knew exactly what they were doing." He pointed to the power of attorney. "This is the key document. It authorized someone to sell my property on my behalf. The signature was supposed to be mine. The date made my stomach turn. I had been in intensive care that day. I was connected to monitors," I said. "I couldn't even hold a pen." Mercer nodded. "Do you have medical records?" "Yes." "We'll obtain them immediately." He made several phone calls. An hour later, copies of my hospital records were emailed to his office. He spread them across the desk. Admission time, surgery time, recovery notes, medication records, nursing observations. "There's no question," he said. "You were physically incapable of signing this document." Michael leaned forward. "So the sale is invalid?" Mercer hesitated. "That's more complicated." He explained that the buyers had purchased the property in good faith. They had paid market value. They had received a recorded deed. Undoing the transaction would require proving fraud. And whoever committed the fraud, he added, had access to Mr. Hayes's personal documents. I frowned. "What kind of documents?" "Identification, property records, signature samples." Michael suddenly became very still. "Sarah." I looked at him. "What?" "She organized your paperwork." I tried to remember. After my surgery had been scheduled, Sarah had offered to help. She said it would make things easier if my bills and insurance documents were organized before I went into the hospital. She asked for copies of my driver's license, I said slowly. Michael closed his eyes. "She also asked me where you kept the house documents." The room fell silent. "No," he whispered. "She wouldn't." Mercer looked at him carefully. "Your wife may not have acted alone." Michael stood up abruptly. "I'm calling her." She didn't answer. He called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Then a text message arrived. "I need some time. Please don't involve lawyers yet." Michael stared at the screen. "What does that mean?" Mercer extended his hand. "May I?" He read the message. "This is interesting." "Why?" She didn't deny anything. Michael looked sick. He left the office and stepped into the hallway. I could hear him arguing with someone on the phone. When he returned, his face was pale. She admitted she signed papers. I felt something inside me break. "What papers?" "She says they were insurance documents." Mercer leaned back. "That's unlikely." An hour later, we requested surveillance records from the hospital. Visitors had been logged electronically. The printout arrived just before noon. Mercer read it silently. Then he looked up at us. "Mr. Hayes." "What?" "Sarah visited you on the exact day this power of attorney was supposedly signed." Michael stared at him. "She came alone." I remembered almost nothing from that week. The medication had blurred everything. But I did remember one moment. Sarah had stood beside my bed holding a clipboard. She smiled and said, "These are just routine hospital forms." I signed where she pointed. My hand was trembling. I never read the pages. Michael whispered, "Oh my God." Mercer's expression became even more serious. This wasn't a random forgery. He tapped the notarized document. This was a planned property transfer. I looked at the signature again. It was mine. Or close enough that someone had expected no one would question it. Mercer closed the file. "The most important question is no longer whether your daughter-in-law deceived you." He paused. "It's who prepared the documents." He turned his computer screen toward us. The power of attorney had been notarized by a man named Leonard Brooks. Mercer typed the name into a legal database. His expression changed instantly. "Mr. Hayes." "What is it?" "This notary has been connected to 3 previous investigations involving fraudulent real estate transfers." Before I could respond, Mercer opened another document. The same real estate agency had handled every single sale. For the first time since I had been discharged from the hospital, I stopped thinking only about my house. I started thinking about other people. If that real estate agency had been involved in 3 previous investigations, then I wasn't the first victim. And I probably wouldn't be the last. Daniel Mercer made a decision that surprised me. "Don't call the police yet." Michael looked at him in disbelief. "What?" "If we file a report immediately, the agency will know exactly what evidence we have. They'll close ranks, destroy records, and move money." "So we do nothing?" "No," Mercer said calmly. "We find out how big this operation is." I had never been the kind of man who enjoyed investigations. I had spent 40 years repairing electrical systems in public schools. I believed in straightforward problems and straightforward solutions. But there was nothing straightforward about discovering that someone had stolen your home while you were recovering from heart surgery. Mercer hired a private investigator named Linda Grant. Within 48 hours she had uncovered more than I expected. The agency was called Brookstone Property Group. It had a spotless public reputation. Excellent reviews. Award plaques. Community sponsorships. Professional advertisements featuring smiling families and happy retirees. Behind that image was something far darker. Linda placed a folder on Mercer's desk. These properties were transferred under unusual circumstances. 5 houses. All owned by elderly people. All sold while the owners were hospitalized, in assisted living, or temporarily out of state. All represented by the same agency. The same notary. And in 3 cases, the sales were completed through powers of attorney. I stared at the photographs of the houses. One belonged to an 81-year-old widow. Another to a retired firefighter. A third to a man with Parkinson's disease. What happened to them? Linda sighed. They spent years in court. Michael clenched his fists. This is organized. Mercer nodded. Yes. The next question was Sarah's role. Linda obtained financial records through a legal request connected to the civil investigation. Sarah had received a wire transfer of $68,000 2 days after the sale of my house. The sender was a company called Maple Crest Holdings. Mercer traced the company. It shared an address with Brookstone Property Group. Michael stared at the documents. She told me she got a consulting job. I looked at my son. He looked as if someone had taken apart his entire life. She said she was helping with administrative work. The money had not gone into their joint account. It had gone into an account Michael didn't know existed. He whispered, "She planned this." That evening he confronted her. He asked me to stay away, but I couldn't. I sat in my car across the street from their house. An hour later, Michael came outside alone. He looked 10 years older. She admitted it. I opened the door. She admitted everything. She admitted that she signed the papers. My heart sank. She said the agency told her it was legal because she had a power of attorney. But she forged it. She says they prepared everything. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Dad, she said they told her old people lose track of paperwork all the time. For a moment I couldn't speak. I thought about my wife. I thought about the years we had spent building that home. To them, it had been an opportunity. A transaction. An elderly man recovering from surgery. An empty house. Easy money. She said they promised her a percentage of the sale. Mercer listened carefully. She's minimizing her role. What do you mean? She knew enough to hide the money. The next morning, Linda brought us something even more important. A former Brookstone employee had agreed to talk. His name was Kevin Ross. He had worked there for 18 months before resigning. He was terrified. They targeted seniors, he said. How? They looked for people who were isolated, hospitalized, or dependent on relatives. He described forged signatures, manipulated notarizations, pressure on vulnerable homeowners. And one detail made my blood run cold. Sometimes they used family members. Mercer leaned forward. Family members? Someone close to the owner would provide access to documents. Kevin looked directly at me. Your daughter-in-law wasn't the mastermind. She was the access point. The agency had lawyers, financial shell companies, title specialists, people who knew exactly how to move property before anyone noticed. This is bigger than a fake signature, Mercer said. It's a criminal enterprise. I should have felt hope. Instead, I felt fear. Organizations like that didn't disappear quietly. That afternoon I received a phone call. The number was blocked. A man's voice said only one sentence. You're making a mistake, Mr. Hayes. The call ended. Mercer reported it immediately. Then he looked at me. They know you're investigating. For the first time, I understood that getting my house back was no longer the only issue. We were threatening people who had stolen multiple homes. And they had already proven they were willing to forge documents, manipulate officials, and use family members against their own relatives. That evening, Linda called with one final discovery. A local investigative reporter named Emily Carter had been researching Brookstone for months. She believed the agency was connected to a much larger fraud network. And she wanted to meet me. When we arrived at the television station the next morning, Emily placed a thick stack of files on the table. Then she said the one thing none of us expected. "I think your house is the story that can finally bring them down." Emily Carter wasn't interested in sensational stories. She was interested in evidence. For nearly 2 hours she listened without interrupting. She asked for timelines, hospital records, bank transfers, and copies of every document Daniel Mercer had collected. When she finished reading, she closed the folder and looked directly at me. "This is not just a family betrayal," she said. "It's a public interest story." She explained that she had been investigating Brookstone Property Group for almost 8 months. Several elderly homeowners had contacted her, but none of them had enough proof to expose the entire operation. "You do." Mercer remained cautious. "We're not giving them everything." Emily nodded. "You shouldn't." The plan she proposed was simple. We would continue the civil case. She would continue the investigation. And we would let Brookstone believe they were still in control. For the next 3 weeks, I lived a strange double life. Publicly, I was an old man fighting to recover his home. Privately, I was helping build a case that could destroy an entire network of fraudulent property transfers. Linda Grant uncovered shell companies connected to Brookstone. Mercer subpoenaed financial records. Emily interviewed former employees. One by one, people who had been afraid began to talk. Then Brookstone made a mistake. A lawyer representing the agency requested a private meeting. Mercer insisted we record everything legally. The meeting took place in a conference room overlooking downtown. The lawyer smiled politely. "Mr. Hayes, my clients would like to resolve this matter quietly." "What does quietly mean?" He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a settlement offer. $800,000. Nearly twice the value of my house. "All claims withdrawn," Mercer read. "No criminal referrals. No media involvement." I looked at the lawyer. "You're trying to buy my silence. We're trying to avoid unnecessary litigation." I pushed the folder back. "I don't want your money." His smile faded. "Mr. Hayes, these situations can become very unpleasant." They already have. After he left, Mercer looked at me. "That offer tells us everything." "What?" "They're scared." Emily agreed. Companies that are innocent don't pay double market value to make a story disappear. The pressure intensified. Anonymous calls. Letters with no return address. Someone followed Michael home twice. Mercer requested additional protection orders. Meanwhile, Michael was living in a small apartment after separating from Sarah. He had filed for divorce. The day he handed her the papers, she called me. For the first time since everything had happened. "I need to explain. You had weeks. I made a terrible mistake. You stole my home. They told me it was temporary." I almost laughed. Temporary. They said the sale would be reversed after some financial restructuring. "You received $68,000. Silence. I was desperate. For what? I wanted security. I thought about all the years I had spent helping them. Helping with their down payment. Paying for repairs. Watching their children. You sold the only thing your mother-in-law and I built together." She began crying. "I never thought it would go this far. It went exactly as far as greed always goes." I ended the call. A week later, Emily called with urgent news. Brookstone was preparing another transaction. Another elderly homeowner. Another power of attorney. "This is our chance." Mercer developed a strategy. Instead of waiting for a lengthy trial, We would seek an emergency court hearing based on newly discovered evidence. Emily would simultaneously air the investigation. If the public saw the pattern, the court would understand that my case was not an isolated dispute. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. Emily's segment was scheduled for Thursday evening. Everything depended on timing. Then, 24 hours before the hearing, Linda received a message from Kevin Ross. He had disappeared for several days. When he finally contacted her, he sounded terrified. "They know I talked." He agreed to meet us in a secure location. He arrived carrying a cardboard box. Inside were internal Brookstone files, client lists, commission records, copies of forged signature samples, and one document that made Mercer stand up immediately. It was a training memo. It instructed agents how to identify vulnerable elderly homeowners and obtain access through relatives. Sarah's name appeared on one of the referral sheets. She had been listed as a family facilitator. Mercer looked at me. "This changes everything." Emily stared at the documents. "If this is authentic, it proves the fraud was systematic." Before we could discuss it further, Kevin took out his phone. "I have one more thing." He pressed play. A recorded conversation filled the room. A voice I had never heard before said, "If Hayes becomes a problem, the notary will deny everything." Kevin looked at us. "That's the regional manager." Emily slowly closed her notebook. "I'm moving the story." "What do you mean?" "I'm not waiting for the evening broadcast." She looked directly at me. "We're going live from the courthouse tomorrow." The next morning, as television crews began setting up outside the courthouse steps, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Sarah stepped out. And she wasn't alone. She was walking beside the notary who had certified the fake power of attorney. I never imagined that the fight for my home would end in front of television cameras. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, photographers, and people who had come simply because they had seen the breaking news alert that morning. Emily Carter was already live on air. Behind her stood the entrance to the courthouse. And standing 20 feet away from me was Sarah. She looked nothing like the confident woman who had once organized my medical paperwork. She looked exhausted. Beside her stood Leonard Brooks, the notary who had certified the fraudulent power of attorney. When he saw Emily's camera turn toward him, he tried to walk away. Emily followed him. "Mr. Brooks, did you personally witness Richard Hayes sign the power of attorney?" "No comment." "Did you verify his identity?" "No comment." "Were you aware he was in intensive care that day?" He kept walking. Inside the courthouse, Mercer moved quickly. Kevin Ross had provided enough evidence to request an emergency injunction. The judge reviewed the hospital records, the forensic handwriting analysis, the financial transfers, and the internal Brookstone documents. Then something unexpected happened. Leonard Brooks requested permission to speak. The courtroom became completely silent. He looked at Sarah, then at me, then at the judge. "I want immunity." Mercer stared at him. The prosecutor leaned forward. "Tell the truth." Brooks took a deep breath. The signatures were not witnessed. Sarah closed her eyes. The powers of attorney were prepared in advance. He described everything. Brookstone identified vulnerable elderly homeowners. Documents were assembled before the owners even knew their properties were being targeted. Family members were persuaded, manipulated, or paid. The notarizations were completed without proper verification. My house had never been legally sold. The judge didn't wait. He signed the emergency order immediately. The transaction was suspended. The deed transfer was frozen. and the court initiated proceedings to invalidate the sale. Emily's producer rushed into the hallway. "We'll live in 30 seconds. She turned to me. "Richard, the court has already issued the order." I walked outside. The cameras were waiting. Emily looked at me. "Mr. Hayes, what does this ruling mean?" I looked directly into the lens. "It means no family should lose their home because someone saw an elderly parent as an opportunity." Behind the cameras, I saw the couple who had unknowingly bought my house. They looked devastated. I walked over to them. "I'm sorry." The husband shook his head. "We're the ones who should apologize. You did nothing wrong." They had been victims too. They had trusted professionals. They had paid their savings. Fraud had stolen from all of us. Within hours, the story spread across the state. The Attorney General announced a criminal investigation. Brookstone Property Group's offices were searched. Computers were seized. Bank accounts were frozen. 3 executives were arrested before the end of the week. Sarah was charged with fraud, conspiracy, and identity-related offenses. I saw her one last time as deputies escorted her through a courthouse hallway. She looked at me. "I'm sorry." I believed she regretted being caught. I wasn't sure she regretted what she had done. Michael finalized the divorce 6 months later. The process was painful. He blamed himself for not seeing the warning signs. One evening he came to see me while contractors were repairing the damage inside the house. "I should have protected you." I looked around the living room. Most of the furniture was gone. Some of my belongings had never been recovered. "You were deceived too." He shook his head. "I ignored things." So did I. We spent the next several months rebuilding. Not just the house. Our relationship. One Saturday, we found my old oak dining table in a storage unit that had been rented under Brookstone's name. The edges were scratched. One leg was damaged. But it was still the table where my wife had served Thanksgiving dinner every year. Michael helped me carry it back inside. We set it in the center of the dining room. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "Mom would have wanted us to fix this." I nodded. She would have. People often ask whether I got my house back. The answer is yes. The court permanently invalidated the fraudulent sale. The buyers were compensated through the Criminal Restitution Fund. Brookstone disappeared. The notary lost his license. Several people went to prison. But that isn't the part one think about most. The part one remember is sitting on the curb outside my own house, believing I had lost everything. I was wrong. A house can be stolen. A signature can be forged. Documents can be manipulated. But truth has a strange way of surviving. And sometimes the strongest foundation in a home isn't the wood, the brick, or the roof. It's the people who choose to rebuild it together. When Michael leaves now, he locks the front door and hands me the key. I always smile when it fits the lock.